We're talking about the Horizon Post Office scandal, not just the tax issues that have just emerged, but also the level or the lack of compensation, and also the sense of justice. Justice denied, justice delayed. Where is the justice in all this now? How can we make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen ever again, that the people responsible for going after their own with a degree of not just negligence but malevolence will be held to account? Let's go to Dame Dan Johnson, Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Labour MP for Kingston upon Hull North. Good morning, Dan, or rather good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's good to have you on the programme. So, first of all, give me your reaction, or answer me this question. How is it possible that we're suddenly seeing government galvanised into political action because of a television drama that we're all watching on our sofas, reflecting a story that has been around for years? Why did it take a television drama?
That's a brilliant question. It's remarkable, the effect that ITV drama, which was powerful, it was incredibly powerful, and I sat and binge watched it because it was so good. But you're right, this has been going on for years and years and years, and there's been statements in the House, questions in the House, debates in the House. But suddenly that drama, I think because the general public suddenly realised what this meant for people, for their families, for individuals, for mums and dads.
It was the way
children.
The story was told, effectively.
It was. I think it was brilliant. And I've worked for many years on the contaminated blood scandal. And again, that's never had the attention it deserves, because that, as Penny Mordaunt said to me in the Commons on Thursday when I asked a question about this, that's on a whole different level. The Horizon scandal is appalling, but the contaminated blood scandal, people died. Thousands of people died and are still dying. And the government still are dragging their feet on paying those people the compensation that the judge in the public inquiry that the government set up have told them to pay. So there is a real issue about, it seems, when the public become really aware of what's gone on, suddenly the government then feel, oh God, we've got to act, we've got to do something. And I think that's what happened in the last 10 days.
But you cannot wait for a television drama about the contaminated blood scandal. I mean, there might be one in the offing, I have no idea. Maybe someone's planning.
I think there is. But
there should be, but it's ridiculous that we decide the policies of justice, the compensation and what we do about these poor victims based on something that appears on our screens.
Absolutely. And that's why there's a real push now to get a duty of candor into all our public services and into all organisations that are funded by the state. So that you have to admit if things have gone wrong, there has to be that duty of candor. And of course, this came out of the Hillsborough disaster. Sure. And people like Maria Eagle, the MP up in Liverpool, she's fought for years to get that put into law. Now, the government are starting to address that, but it doesn't go as far as it should. I certainly think, when I was fighting on the contaminated blood issue, once we got the government to set up a public inquiry, the first thing was that the Department of Health, who are at the heart of this, were going to be the sponsoring body for that public inquiry. And we had to have a big fight to get that away from the organisation, the department that we thought, was part of the big problem in this. So there's a real issue about the culture of not accepting. You need to be objective. You need to look at things. You need to have candour. All of these things are part of a really big cultural change that we need. Because
what seems to be the theme here seems to be that if the little person that has been, I mean this in inverted commas, the ordinary person that's been affected by whether it's the contaminated blood scandal or whether they're a sub-postmaster, is up against an institution that is so intent on defending itself and its ridiculously overpriced faulty computer program that they completely lose sight of the essential justice at stake here. And whether that's Hillsborough or contaminated blood, or whether it's the post office or indeed the water companies, this is the theme, isn't it?
It is, absolutely it is.
And it upsets us deeply because it's a question of fundamental injustice.
It is. And I think, the great British public believe in fairness. And I think, watching that programme over Christmas, it was sort of shouting at you, wasn't it? The unfairness of that situation and the little person and the inequality of arms, if you like, between the little person. Harm is done to that little person, but they can't get the justice and the fairness that they deserve. And I think that's why perhaps this is going to be the start of a change. Because the government recognise they can't just keep dragging their feet. They can't just keep putting things off. And, at the moment, the government, if they wanted to next week, could come forward, for example, with a statement to the House and say, right, on the contaminated blood scandal, we're going to start paying compensation. They could just say that because the judge has already told them that's what they should do. It's about the political will, I think, and perhaps we are starting to see a change. I hope we are. Because,
the case of Paula Reynolds, I know she's given back her CBE, but here she was in charge of the post office. She presided over the management or mismanagement and the malevolent pursuit of these poor people. Then she left that job and she got another job, a senior job in the NHS.
Yeah.
In another institution.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I wish she was here to answer that question herself. But it seems to be extraordinary that there is a sort of revolving door of people, who've not been held accountable going to the very next job.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key issue there is accountable. How you hold these people to account for what they do. That's the key issue. And I think the former Bishop of Liverpool, when he did the inquiry into Hillsborough, he talked about the unaccountable nature of power and how that can mean then that the way people are treated because no one is held accountable. And it may well be that what has to happen in the Horizon case is that we have to have criminal trials and people have to be held to account through the courts. And, with the infected blood scandal, the contaminated blood scandal, in other countries where this happened, ministers went to prison. So, there are ways...
I mean, James Arbuthnot, the Tory MP who's been dealing with, the Horizon scandal for years, he said to me just the other day on Channel 4 News that actually, yes, people should be put on trial and should go to jail. Are you echoing that call?
Yes, I am. I am, absolutely. Absolutely. When criminal offences have been committed, absolutely people should be held to account, no matter how senior they are. And if they are politicians as well, then they should be held to account. Yes, absolutely.
And of course, no one is really pointing political fingers here because every party was implicated. Ed Davey was Postal Affairs Ministers at one stage in the coalition government. There were Labour Postal Affairs Ministers. There were Tory ones. 17 over the length of this trial. Yeah. Is there another problem here, Diana, that we're just really bad at... We've become obsessed with campaigning. I mean, you lot have, and we to some extent are complicit, but we're really bad at governing, of taking responsibility of political, of governmental departments where we can make a difference.
Governing is really hard. And I think anyone who is a minister will tell you it's relentless, it's hard, it's difficult. But one of the things that's come out of the Horizon scandal is the lack of ministers seemingly asking questions and being inquisitive and seeking different points of view. And I think that's quite important when you're a minister. You can't just accept what people tell you. You have to be inquisitive. And it seems to me perhaps that's something that we've lost and we need to regain that. And if we have an incoming new government, I hope whoever holds ministerial office will be inquisitive, will ask those difficult and searching questions, and also meet with people like Alan Bates, because one of the criticisms of Ed Davey was he refused to meet with him. And I think ministers need to be alive and aware to the fact that probably it's worth talking to people. Now, he might have met him and thought, well, actually, no, I don't think there is anything here. But at least he would have had the opportunity to hear directly from someone affected. And I think that's important.
Indeed. And I know that ministers' in trays are always overflowing. But it's also incumbent on their staff, on the civil servants, and for instance, Windrush, Home Office, Amber Rudd, case in point, alert the minister to what's coming down the pipe, to what they may not be focusing on. Because if you ignore it, you will do so. You could do so at your peril.
Absolutely.
Diana, I hope you don't mind, but I want to just put Jason on the line to you. He's from Pimlico. He's got a question that you might be able to answer. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Jason, go ahead.
If I can.
Morning, Matt, and Happy New Year. Fabulous to speak to you. Two things. One is, I believe privatization in 2015 has a lot to do with it, and nothing has been mentioned about that at all. It was bang in the middle, and obviously everything must have been being ripened up for privatization. Secondly, I believe that there's an institutionally racist element here at the highest level. That hasn't been brought up.
Because a lot of the sub-postmasters were from minority backgrounds.
Yeah, I was looking at the figures here, which was something I saw on Newsnight the other night, and Post Office Freedom of Information request in 2012. 3,220 were white British English, and I haven't done the math, but 1,547 were Indian, 401 Pakistani, 9 Black African, and 50 Bangladeshi.
Okay, well, let's put that to Dana. And so accusations of institutional racism in the post office and privatization is to blame. What do you think?
And I think both of those are very legitimate questions for the public inquiry to look at and look at the evidence and make recommendations. So I think that's perfectly reasonable to ask those questions. I don't know. I'm not at the heart of the Horizon scandal, but I think those are very good questions to ask.
Okay, and just, Dana, in terms of compensation, and we heard, Dan, tax expert, earlier saying something's got to happen. These people can't just be fobbed off with a couple of £100 or even 5,000 quid. They've got to get some money sooner rather than later because they've been waiting for years already. The same thing with contaminated blood, which is something that you've been dealing with a lot. Yeah. I mean, what's the process of giving these people the money they deserve, and can we even afford it?
Well, the process can be set up by the government tomorrow.
Can it?
And yes, and of course we can afford it. I mean, particularly in the case of the infected blood victims, these are people who've lost their lives, children who've lost parents and parents who've lost children. Of course we can. And, we could find money for the billions that were spent on PPE, that were wasted actually on PPE. We can find the money to do this. We have contingencies for this kind of scandal. The issue, of course, is that if people had received compensation 30 years ago, we wouldn't be faced with the bill that we have today. But of course we can afford it. And of course, if the government had the political will, next week they could come to Parliament, make a statement and start the payments. They could do that. This isn't rocket science. This is, we're not putting a man on the moon, are we? We are paying money to people who have suffered at the hands of the state.
And if the government doesn't react to this, and they seem to be, energized to do so right now, maybe because of the election that's coming up this year, then the theme of justice or injustice will become very dominant in this election campaign, won't it?
I think it will. And I think, as I said earlier on, fairness. The British people believe in fairness and believe in people being treated properly when they've been harmed by the state. I think the vast majority of people in this country would say there should be redress for those people, whether it's the Horizon scandal or it's the infected blood scandal or Grenfell or Windrush. The proper compensation and redress needs to be made.
Okay. Dame Dana Johnson, Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, thank you very much indeed for coming on the